So today we are talking to Mr. Ralf Fücks, recently the founder. When exactly you have founded the foundation?
We started the project last summer and went public in November.
I see. So you know how when it was founded. The foundation in English is called Center for Liberal Modernity, right? But Mr. Fücks was also for a number of years a co-chairman of German Green Party, and for a number of years the chairman of Heinrich Böll Foundation.
Much longer was the Heinrich Böll Foundation than at the top of the party.
And about a year ago or 2 years ago, you have authored the book called in English Defending Freedom, which is the main reason I've come to Berlin to talk to Mr. Fücks, because I'm very much interested in defending freedom in Poland, and not only in Poland, but in Poland, as you probably know, freedom, individual freedom, first of all, is really threatened by the current government, but not only by the current government. It will become more or less apparent during our conversation what I have in mind. So, perhaps, well, my questions and the points I will make are mostly based not on your book, but on the articles and interviews you gave. But my friend who is filming our conversation told me that this is more or less what is in the book.
In a nutshell, yeah.
Yes. So I would like to start from the point you have named as a starting point when we talk about defending freedom or freedom in general. And this is, you have written in this article we have on the table that freedom is a starting point and the objective of liberal politics. It is a starting point and most important point to me too. But my problem is that if I look at the surveys made by sociologists or at the results of studies made by the psychologists, I myself political social psychologist, you can see that most people in Poland certainly, and to some degree in Germany, do not want individual freedom. If you make a survey and give a list of values to people in Poland and in Germany, just these two countries, and among those, let's say 20 values, there is individual freedom. Only 16% of Polish people count individual freedom as one of the 5 most important values, and in Germany it's just 23%. Oops. So it is a bit paradoxical situation. We want freedom, but people mostly do not really care about freedom. So what would be your first reaction to this problem?
Yeah, maybe I would frame the picture a little bit then different. I would hope, and I think that most people, especially in Germany, they appreciate the degree of democratic liberties, of rule of law, of free speech, of independent media. And especially when you compare it to the authoritarian experience in Germany with the Third Reich or the DDR, if you would ask people in which political system would you prefer to live, the big majority would say, of course, we want to live in a democratic society. But I would agree that compared to other values and objectives, freedom is not on the top of the preferences. Especially if you are comparing freedom with social security, and also a sense of or social justice. People would vote for the alternatives, and that's true. And a specific answer to that, especially in Germany, is the link between democracy and social security, social participation. So it's all this talk about social democracy refers to that basic instinct that you should not put people into a choice between freedom and security. So I think all the friends and lovers of liberty, we have to care how to link freedom with a certain degree at last of security and social justice. I think this is the main challenge to answer and to confront these anti-liberal and anti-authoritarian and authoritarian swing we are confronted with all over Europe and in the United States.
I see. If you compare, relating to what you have just said, making this comparison between freedom and security, personal security, if you compare freedom with the need for power, for example, would people in Germany, because I think in Poland, if you ask people, would you prefer to be free or would you prefer to be in power, I am sure most people would choose power, not freedom.
Personal power? Or
personal and political. Well, if I ask a question generally, and I would...
that's interesting, because I would say in Germany, power has not this kind of attractivity, or it's not a popular term.
It's not popular in the sense that people do not really need it, or they would be ashamed to admit it in public that they crave for it, perhaps.
Yeah, if you are looking to the term power from a foreign policy perspective, then interestingly, Germans, or the majority of Germans, they would shy away from seeing Germany as a powerful political player, of course.
And I'm mainly interested in the moment.
It's just I would say, it's just the kind of negation to our past. Yeah, Germany as a obsessed with power. And now that most people tend to kind of collective pacifism. Very strange.
Is it really genuine?
Is it?
Is it genuine? Is it honest? Are people just pacifists for these historical political reasons in public, or they are really in their spirit?
No, if you're looking to the younger generations, especially higher educated young people, they since decades they had been refusing to go to the military. And as a consequence of that, conscription has been abolished in Germany. And all these foreign missions the German army, the Bundeswehr, is involved in are not popular in the German public. Military spending is totally unpopular. So people say, no, why should we spend taxes on military, let's spend it on pensions and social security or education. It's really a changing mindset.
Recently by Mr. Trump.
Yeah, it's a changing mindset, and I would say has gone a little bit too far, because most Germans are, I would say, they are not very aware of the international responsibility that Germany has, and that military security is not just a matter of the past. That we have to think about security in new terms, challenged by the new authoritarian powers like Russia, or also by extremist Islamism, and so. But if you're looking to power as a more domestical topic, I think people are insisting that they have a say, that their voice is heard, and they want to have political power in a sense that not only the political elites should take decisions which are affecting the everyday life of the people. So, in terms of political participation, there is, I would say, they would value to have a certain degree of power.
Yes, at first I'd like to say, I'd like to emphasize more than say, that I fully agree with this link you have spoken about between security, personal security, and the need for freedom. And actually, in my last recording in Poland, we spoke about it with my Polish friend psychologist, about the connection between sense of security and rationality. Because you cannot be rational if you are very insecure. So this is just to mention.
So freedom from fear.
Yes.
Freedom from fear is absolutely basic.
The condition.
This is the precondition
fully human.
Yeah, of making use of your liberties and acting as a self-determined person. So we should be very careful about that, and freedom from fear at least has two dimensions, to be then protected against state arbitrary violence, I would say. If you are giving the state the monopole then of power, you need checks and balances and some securities against the arbitrary use of political power. So rule of law, independent judiciary, all these kind of institutions to protect you from being violated by state authorities. But the second dimension, of course, is a certain degree of social security. Yeah, not to be afraid,
but also not
how to survive
also
tomorrow.
Not to be degraded, because there are types of social security organizations which, although they ensure certain security, but at the same time they label you as an underclass person who needs social security to survive. So I think European approach to social security is good, because it usually, in most cases, avoids this degrading aspect of.
I would say it's
money, but
if I'm talking about social security, it's not in this paternalistic understanding. There's a strong state protecting you against.
We are talking to Polish viewers.
Yeah, a strong state protecting you against the risks of life, or the dynamics of globalization and technological disruptive change. No, it is more about social rights as citizens' rights. For instance, the right to education. Yeah, to that every citizen has a basic right to access to public education, and at the same time it is about empowering people to deal with the modern world, to deal with technological change, then to deal with the new qualifications or the new skills needed in a knowledge society. So it's about empowering and enabling people, and not so much about taking away their responsibility for their own life. Yeah, it's like a liberal understanding of social security is much more centered about the capacity of people.
Yes, we'll come back to this point again, but now I would like to finish the first issue, I would say, general problem. The one I have started to speak about, asking you about this individual freedom, because you connected the problem of individual freedom with the issue of the need to belong.
Yeah.
You say that liberal-minded people should not forget that we all humans have this need to, as you say it in English at least, to belong.
Yeah, to be connected. Oh, no, there's a risk of...
That's what I wanted to ask, whether it is really from the liberal or a liberal point of view, is it really the need to belong or to the need to be together with others, or to be connected?
This is my interpretation of belonging.
I see.
Yeah, it's
so I agree even more
it's not this kind of belonging to an ethnical or religious or traditional group of.
So you should correct this
of
because
people.
It's important difference.
Yeah, it is about being interconnected than with others. I would say it's for most of the people it's a very important message. You are not alone. We will not leave you alone when you are in difficult circumstances and when your social existence is threatened, whatever. We will not leave you alone. So it's also an element of solidarity, to care for the other. I would say against a cold understanding of individuality. Yeah, so we are not monads. We are not solipsistic than individuals. To live your individual freedom is always related to others. It is always in this kind of interaction and then exchange with others. So I think liberalism needs an understanding of society. You know, there's this famous quote of Margaret Thatcher when she said, "There is no such thing like society. There is only the individual and maybe the family, and then the state." No, there is such thing like society, and I think we need an understanding for the importance of this, let's say, connectivity, for this self-perception of stability and a security in your life. You know, it's always, nobody of us can only exist in a mood of change. It's very important to be open for change, to deal with change, to learn, to develop yourself, but at the same time you need a certain degree of stability.
I fully agree, but a little more about this connectivity, as you say. On our TV, and not only, also in writing, I try to popularize the idea, to remember the idea of friendship as important value, also social value, because I'm not sure about Germany, but I think in Poland, the idea and the value of friendship, mostly because of the ideology of the 90s, of this militant neoliberalism, so that everybody should compete with everybody, has been almost forgotten. Of course, I exaggerate a bit. So my idea of liberal community, with this, including this value of interconnectivity, that's what I call community based on friendship. Of course, it's an ideal. We can't all of us be friends.
Let's say it's based on cooperation. You know, it's not only, of course, friendship is a very emotional, and I would say friendship, in my understanding, I would say it's very personal and very special. So I can't imagine to have hundreds of friends. Yeah, it's only few people you are really connected with on a personal, emotional base, but cooperation is a much broader
cooperation is
frame
really possible if some amount of friendship, it's perhaps a little
emphatic cooperation, not just functional, but
empathetic,
empathetic. Let's work together. Let's act together. Also in a political sense, what does it mean to act politically? It is acting with others. It's about collective actions for shared goals and shared objectives, but also in social life. Building networks, mutual assistance, and care for each other. And so we are living in a period where in which traditional security networks are dissolving. Family, the big family, people, different generations are now living in different cities, sometimes even in different countries.
But sometimes if they live in the
neighborhood has become
family is not always the place which really gives you the sense of security.
That's true. It could also be a very brutal area of,
but I know what you mean.
Force and violations. But I think for most people, family is about mutual assistance and so kind of guarantee of last resort. But we can no longer rely on these traditional communities. Let's see it like that. The big family, or the neighborhood, or the religious community. So we have to create new forms or new kinds of social coherence and of mutual assistance. And not only rely on state institutions, but of course we need these kind of, I would say, basic guarantees provided by the government or provided by public institutions, better. And this kind of civil society solidarity and cooperation.
Let's take another step in our conversation. In your article about defending freedom and liberal democracy, you speak also about the issue of winners and losers. And you say that we have to alleviate, let's say, the consequences of this neoliberal ideology and the consequences of this too hard competition, and the fact that there are too many losers and the gap between the losers and the winners is broadening. I sympathize with this approach, of course. I consider myself to be liberal left, so for ethical reasons at least, I fully agree with this. But the problem in Poland, but also in Germany in the 30s, is that it is not mainly the losers who support authoritarian power.
That's true.
In Germany, in Poland today, it has been found recently by sociologists that people who support this authoritarian government are not losers. They are not very wealthy mostly, but quite wealthy. They are mostly owners of small companies being run in a very authoritarian way. It's a long story. This is just supposed to be a question, so I won't develop it too much. But how would you answer to this? Because you seem to suggest, let's say in the spirit of Erich Fromm, that people who are losers escape from freedom, and this social tension resulting from this winners-losers gap broadening may lead in consequence to more authoritarian preferences, while it is not losers, as I have already said, who support authoritarian.
Yes, I agree, and it's then evident if you're looking to the support base of these now authoritarian, nationalist, xenophobic, right-wing political movements and parties. I would say it's a combination of people feeling marginalized or devalued in their skills and in their social position. For instance, if you look to the workers in this blue belt, the old industrial regions in the United States, I think this is really obvious. Or in some parts of Great Britain, when you're looking to the supporters of Brexit, it has been parts of these old industrial working class which has been degraded over the last 20-30 years. They lost their jobs, their wages had been going down, and also their social status had been devaluated. So this is one part. But there are other parts. Of course, there are middle class people who are still quite well off, but who are afraid of change. They are afraid of disruptive change. And fear is a very important emotional source for these authoritarian, anti-liberal movements. And there are other groups in the society who are much more furious, not about socio-economic issues, but about cultural change. All these people who feel threatened by these postmodern, gender democracy and the recognition of different sexes. There is not only two sexes, women and men, now that numerous various sexes, and all they have equal rights and equal dignity, and especially, of course, I would say the crisis of the patriarchat, the crisis of the traditional patriarchalic family, and all these elements together, mass immigration from people from different religious and cultural backgrounds also plays into that. So in Germany there's a term, I don't know the English translation, Überfremdung, feeling as a stranger at home, feeling like a stranger at home. So all these kind of, I would say, irritations, socio-economic threats, cultural change which is perceived as a threat, are reinforcing each other. They are playing together. So I would say polarization between winners and losers of globalization and digital change is one part, but it's not the whole story.
No. If you speak about fear of change and some other issues you mentioned, I think, on the basis of some studies and observations, that actually those who support in Poland especially this new authoritarian wave and regime are people who are not afraid of change, even of this theoretically threatening immigration, because in Poland it's very theoretical, of course. But some people are afraid, or they justify their hatred by fear. They say their fear is justified because of terrorism and so on. But I think what's really their motivation, that they say that they are against immigration, is that they hate strangers, not necessarily are afraid of them. But generally I wanted to say something about hate. It has been found by sociologists some months ago in Poland that those not losers I mentioned before, if they are asked why do they support the current very authoritarian regime, is they give in many ways, because the studies were composed of surveys and interviews, personal interviews, and it has been found that the main reason probably is that they hate elites, and this government is perceived as a representation of ordinary
people. Yeah.
And in Poland, they hate elites, and
they hate the liberal globalist elites. Yeah.
They call it elites, and by that word, in Polish context, they understand even just someone like me who comes from Warsaw. Because if you come from Warsaw, a small town, you are more or less considered to be close to elite, especially if you occasionally are on TV.
Academic.
So, first of all, they hate elites, but they also hate people who are in underclass, or are called underclass, very poor people who are losers, real. And my very tentative, basic sort of hypothetical theory is that this is partly the result of the digital revolution. Because my impression is that due to the internet, I am an internet user, I spend 5 hours a day mostly reading various articles, but I use internet, I'm not an enemy of internet. But I have noticed that hate, probably because of the nature of the internet, certain kind of democratization resulting from the fact that anyone can express his or her opinion on the internet. Anyone is a journalist, a publisher, opinion maker, that people stopped to be ashamed of hate.
Especially because it's much more anonymous. You know, it's different if you are insulting someone in his or her face directly, on a personal way. You can do it on a much more anonymous way, and you are not taken into responsibility for your this kind of hate speech. In the contrary, you have like-minded people who are applauding you, so you have these kind of reinforcing bubbles. I would agree that the digital sphere, the internet media, I would say they have increased, or they have heated up.
That's what I meant.
This kind of the degree of hate in our public conversation and in the public sphere, but they are not. It's not the root case.
It's not what?
It's not
The main reason.
The main reason. It's not the main reason. I would say it's more kind of accelerator. It is. I would say that
I call it
hate,
emancipator, because these people sort of hated always, but they were ashamed of it.
But
now they are not ashamed. You know, when this government very explicitly expressed hate to all.
Yeah, look to
and
Trump.
People are happy when they watch this thing.
Look to Trump.
Yeah.
Trump, I think he's the worst example for a political leader using hate as a tool. Yeah, and most of his, or a lot of his Twitter bites, this is just hate speech.
Yeah,
and
sure.
so of course this is a kind of legitimization. Yeah, it's getting normal. It's no longer, you have no longer to be ashamed.
Yeah.
Than about talking like that. No, if he can do it, I'm entitled to do it then too. But if you're looking to the root causes, to the main reasons, I think it is again related with a growing degree of insecurity, then in terms that you are feeling the old world is disappearing, and you feel threatened by this change. And then, you know, if people don't understand really what is going on there, they tend to define some how would you say it in English? Some groups of, they are targeting them as they are responsible. They are the culprits.
To blame
them. They are the culprits for things you are afraid of, or you don't understand. Yeah, and is it the Jews? Then traditionally, or is it the international finance capital, or is it the globalist elites, the intellectuals? Then whatever you are looking for groups of culprits to blame them for things which, in your view, are going wrong. And I think hate has always, of course, I would say
fear.
I would say hate is an element, of course, of the human existence, but it is growing in times when the level of fear. The level of there's a relationship or a kind of interconnection between fear and hate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To some degree, certainly. Okay. So maybe, perhaps one more point in this field. I have realized, and again, not only in Poland, that quite a large proportion of those who support this authoritarian change are intellectuals, and from Warsaw, from Krakow. In Poland it's quite obvious, but also in the West.
That's interesting.
That's very strange, and I wonder if you want to explain this phenomenon in terms of this fear, which seems to be the main root cause of all these negative changes you are talking about, or perhaps it's something else, because it was in Germany in the 30s.
Yeah.
Also,
of course, you always had this. I would say this element of, for a long time, I would say, of this kind of self-hating children of the bourgeoisie. Then intellectuals coming from big aristocratic or then bourgeois, then families, well-educated, privileged, turning against these what in Germany we say bürgerliche Gesellschaft. It's not just bourgeois. It is these. I would say it's a mix of the capitalist, the private property, the economies, and political liberalism. And you find this kind of radicalization of intellectuals on the communist part of the anti-liberal tradition, and you find it in the fascist or the extreme right wing. Intellectuals have been the thinkers and paving the way for these kind of ideologies. Partly, I think, because it is giving intellectuals a kind of power.
That's what I think.
A kind of political power.
But why
they are missing? They are missing.
Why do they need this power?
Yeah, maybe because I think it has a certain degree of attraction, that you are not only writing scientific articles and giving distinguished lectures and writing in the feuilletons of the press. No, you are part of the power play. You are part of the, and you can connect.
You can create the world.
Yeah, and you can connect to the people. You can connect to the people. You are becoming part of a powerful movement. And I think this always has been an attraction for intellectuals, to escape their isolation, to escape this kind of individualism. Yeah,
don't you think
to become part of a collective.
Don't you think they really, many of them, not all of them, not even majority of them, but significant portion, really feel like gods, and they just want to impose their thoughts and ideas on people?
Yeah, I would say at least, to come back to the beginning of the interview, I would say it's a fascination of power. But at the same time, I think it would be worthwhile to think a little bit deeper. Why do you have these, especially I would say in Germany, but also in other European countries, you have this very, very strong anti-liberal tradition. And it's not only a matter of intellectual arguments, it's really extremely emotional. If you intellectuals like Carl Schmitt or Spengler or even Heidegger in the philosophical area, they are really deeply in conflict with what I would call liberal modernity. You know, this process of individualization, the loss of tradition, the new mass consumerism, this kind of capitalist civilization, which they link to America and to a certain extent to Great Britain, multicultural societies. They see it as a kind of degeneration, a decline of the heroic human being, and so this is very, very deep-rooted in the European academic tradition.
I'm afraid we'll not have time to talk about everything in the part called what should we do, what could we do, but just let me ask you just one question from this field. Well, you mentioned in your article that one of the important fields of action for liberals to improve the situation from liberal point of view is something you call ego strength, that we should, through education, through upbringing, develop or strengthen what you have called ego strength, and you say that the way to it is through stronger or better self-efficacy. And I would add that perhaps equally important is self-esteem.
Yeah.
Not only self-efficacy. Actually, being Polish, I had this half-joking idea that this difference between your self-efficacy and my self-esteem is partly, perhaps, I'm joking a bit, please be warned, the difference between German approach and Polish approach. We do not care that much for efficacy in Poland, as you probably, it's meant to be a German. Well, could you say something about that?
Yeah, I don't see such a thing. I think we are. It's not such a difference. It is about You could name it self-esteem or the self-confidence. The self-confidence that you will be able to master your life, and that you feel not as a victim of circumstances you cannot shape, you cannot influence. So it is kind of empowerment of young people. This is one part of the story, and of course this is very much about young education. And I would say lifelong self-improvement and self-development. But of course, this is not just a challenge to individuals. You need public institutions. For instance, I'm absolutely convinced that we need a strong public educational sector from kindergarten to university, which is funded by taxes and not by individual payments, fees. But it's a little bit more. I think we have to rethink about the importance, the meaning of public institutions in general. Public institutions as, I would say, stability anchors in times of rapid and fundamental change. Public institutions as the representation of the democratic republic. What could you be proud of as a citizen? I would say this is very much about public institutions. It's school, theaters, museums, public transport. If you consider why in the turn from the 19th to the 20th centuries, all these wonderful railway stations had been built like palaces. This had kind of, it was both a symbol of technical progress, so we believe in technical progress, we are proud of it, and it was a kind of public institutions, republican institutions. Everybody should be enabled to travel and so on. I think this has been neglected over the last decades. It was too much about private wealth, private property, and neglect of the public wealth. So I think we need a kind of combination of classical liberalism with its individualistic approach, individual freedom, and republicanism. the idea of the democratic republic as a set of institutions. Yeah.
I'd like to add only that if we speak about this ego strength, self-efficacy, self-esteem, self-confidence, the problem in Poland as a rural society still, although a lot of people from the rural parts of the country move to towns, but even in large towns like in Warsaw, perhaps half of the population is actually of rural roots culturally. So the problem is that they not only are not able to influence their own lives, to decide about their lives, but they don't feel they have the right to do it. So it's more basic perhaps than in Western Europe. Really many people from this rural cultural roots just don't give them the right to speak. If, for example, if you are not considered, if you are not located in society, in a position which gives you the right to speak, and you say something, simple people in small towns, in the villages, they say, who are you to say? And they, of course, do not give the same right to themselves. And they see that you've come to them, you talk to them, so you are more or less the same, because they are in direct contact with you.
This is one of the big achievements of the workers' movement in the 19th and 20th century, that it gave people a voice and the right to speak which had not been heard than before by collective action. And I think this is a huge problem now, that if you have at the same time a process of social marginalization, so people are left behind, and they are completely individualized. There's no social interconnection between them. Then they become very vulnerable for all kinds of xenophobic and then authoritarian ideas, which promise to give them some pride. Yeah, you can be proud
as a Pole,
to be Polish, or to be, you are proud to be
Catholic,
whatever. Yeah, and so it's, I think it's extremely important. So we come back to this idea of interconnection, connectivity,
self-esteem, personal self.
Yeah, but personal self-esteem by joining with others, by collaboration, by then collective.
I'm smiling because in Poland we view liberals as people who are obsessed with individuality. And you are the founder of modern liberalism or liberal modernism, and you obviously have focused mostly on this communal interconnectedness and so on.
I think we have to reconcile the classical, which I, of course, individual freedom is just my identity, but we need to link this narrative of individual freedom with kind of social connection and responsibility, and so
I'd like to remind Polish viewers that one of the values which was at the very beginning of liberalism, philosophical liberalism, let's say, was rationality. So if even individual freedom is most important to us, we need to rationally approach the social, political stage and life, and this recognition of the importance of this communal.
There's a social dimension of individual freedom.
It's absolutely necessary. Also, if we are mostly focused on individual freedom, we need to understand that we have to live together because that's our nature and that's what we want also. So thank you very much for this interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Good.